Now, I'd like to welcome to the program David Barrett. He is founder and CEO of Expensify. And please note that we taped this conversation before the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. So I'm here with David Barrett. He is Expensify founder and CEO. And David, great to speak with you. Thank you for taking the time. You caused an uproar about 2 weeks ago when you sent an email to 10 million users of Expensify software. And the gist of your message was go vote, but go vote against Donald Trump specifically because, quote, anything less than a vote for Biden is a vote against democracy. Walk me through your thinking on this email. How did the idea come about and how long did you deliberate on it?
Well, this might seem kind of out of the blue if you don't know much about Expensify, but we've been a pretty values-oriented company for a long time. So, for example, earlier this year, we launched a nonprofit. Throughout COVID, we've been actually reimbursing individual SNAP recipients for groceries. We've been engaging with BLM protesters in Portland, which is where our largest office is. So we've been pretty involved in social issues for a long time. This is maybe the first kind of overtly political move, but this is not kind of a new thing for the company overall. And as far as working up the election, just trying to really think through what can we do to help? Because these are scary times. And we feel that Trump is doing some really dangerous moves, and we want to do something about it.
So you had told my colleague, Emily Chang of Bloomberg Technology, that the core of your message was pretty straightforward and therefore non-controversial. Democracy is important, it's worth protecting, and vote suppression is a bad thing. But that's not exactly what you wrote in the email to users. Why did you go beyond that to include how you thought it should be fixed?
Well, I would say anything less than a straightforward call to action is kind of like hiding, behind the curtains a bit. I think that realistically, we believe that the Trump administration has been attempting massive voter suppression. And in order to change that, it's not just about voting for anyone, it's about voting in a specific fashion. Now, I understand that there's a lot of disagreement about whether or not Trump has been doing that. And I think that's the real heart of this challenge. It comes down to, do you believe that our elections are fair, like all of our experts, or not? And if you agree that they're fair, like the experts, then you would agree that things like voter ID laws or restricting where you can vote in your cars and things like this, all of these are designed to surgically disenfranchise voters. And so if you're going to just call it as it is, you have to do a call to action that actually addresses the real problem. And I think that we didn't mince words about it.
Yeah, I like what you say about how it's a call to action. So if it's a call to action and you sign this on behalf of Expensify, who in the company did you involve in the process?
Everyone. So we're about 130 employees, and we had an open discussion involving the entire company. The newsletter draft itself was shared with everyone, and everyone took turns, editing it, fact-checking it, and things like this. And so we have a variety of internal processes that facilitate these kinds of complicated discussions, because if you're going to have a diverse organization, diversity means a wide variety of opinions. And if you aren't getting a wide variety of opinions, and if you don't have processes to kind of manage those constructively, your environment probably isn't very diverse. And so as a diverse and inclusive environment, we try to celebrate a wide diversity of opinions, but also not be paralyzed by those opinions by demanding perfect consensus to everything.
So you mentioned you have 130 employees. I wonder, particularly the younger ones, what kind of expectations do they place on you, on the company overall, to take a stand on societal issues? And, keeping in mind that this isn't Expensify's first attempt or effort in involving itself in social issues.
That's interesting. I wouldn't say that there's like an age bias there. I can't say that this was like a response to our the millennials or something like this. This is something that cuts across the entire demographic of our company. I think everyone feels compelled to do more than just expense reports. Yeah, it's easy to say, it's like, oh, we're an expense reporting company, what can we do? But our attitude is, we're an expense reporting company. What can we do? What tools do we have at our disposal to actually influence this important issue? And so we've all basically agreed we can do more than just technology. We can do more than just make money. We can try to make the world a better place.
I assume that you guys have been working from home because of the pandemic, or a big portion of you have. Do you think this would have unfolded the same way if everyone was in the office?
I think so. So we've been a mostly remote company for a very long time. We're a weird company in a bunch of different ways. like every year we take the company overseas for a month, including all of our families. And so we've been pretty hardened world travelers, and sort of like sort of working remote is very common to us. And so this transition to work from home hasn't really affected very much. I think it's been sort of a novelty, but it hasn't really been, a huge disruption to us.
All right, so let's talk about the outcome here, because we conducted a poll on social media and we asked our followers, how often have you changed your mind about a product or a service after learning about a CEO's view on political or societal issues? And the response came in, and here's what we found. 45% of the respondents say several times they've changed their mind. 31% said never, and 24% said maybe once or twice. What kind of blowback did you anticipate before sending out this email? And how many customers were you mentally prepared to lose over this?
Sure. Well, I guess I would start off to say, of the millions of users that we wrote, about 0.5% actually wrote in with any comment, positive or negative. And so first, I don't think we should exaggerate kind of the amount of resonance that this message had in the first place. I think it's easy when, like, at a certain scale, everything you do generates thousands of responses, but thousands of responses could actually just mean kind of nothing at the end of the day. And so, so first, I would say most of our customers didn't really react in any way whatsoever. Second,
was that a disappointment that most people didn't react?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I guess I would say, it's hard. It's very easy to tune out something as big as the dismantling of democracy before your very eyes. It's hard to get people to notice, and that's why we were doing this, is to try to get people to notice. And so I think that I'm very happy with the sort of the coverage and the discussions that have come out of this, but honestly, I want more. I think we need more engagement going forward, not less. And so first, I would say most of our customers didn't engage in the first place. Second, of those users who wrote in, 90% weren't paying customers in the first place. Then when you go on Twitter and you kind of dive into the reactions, it's like the vast majority of Twitter is not a paying customer in the first place either. Most aren't even users. They're just kind of hangers on to looking at, like, retweeting someone else's mention. So I think it's a real tough thing to try to infer business impact based upon these sort of external signals. I would say we didn't go into this desiring or avoiding any particular business impact. We knew it was going to be largely impossible to measure and probably going to be insignificant, but that wasn't really the point. The point was to do something to try to make the world a better place and get this message out that democracy is under attack, and it's on us as citizens to do something about it.
And I'm sure that message resonated with a lot of people, and also potential new customers. I wonder if you gained any new customers, whether they're paying or otherwise.
Well, so it takes time to either buy or leave the product. You don't sort of adopt expense management company-wide overnight, sort of thing. I would say we definitely saw a huge uptick in interest in the website, but the most interesting thing was a tremendous upside to job applicants. So we have a team page called we.r.expensify.com, and we saw skyrocketing attention to that, and lots of applicants specifically mentioning, I'm applying for this particular reason. So I don't know that it had a huge impact upon the business from a revenue or customer perspective, but it has certainly had a huge impact from a recruiting perspective.
That's interesting. Is that something you thought would happen? Did you anticipate that that could be a benefit?
I don't know that we really talked about it. I mean, like, we, have considered everything, but we just didn't really know. Ultimately, it's like, look, we have no idea what's going to happen, but it also doesn't matter. I'm sure in the grand scheme of things, we're a big enough company. We have hundred thousands of paying customers and things like this. We can weather whatever storm comes at us. It's more important to actually do something to stand up for democracy than just kind of like quibble about the effects.
Now, one thing I didn't mention, and you kind of referenced it earlier, how you take the employees for an annual trip overseas. Expensify, you guys are a software company known for handling travel expenses. One of your competitors, for instance, is SAP. And your customers include organizations and companies, including, say, Snapchat, Warby Parker, IDEO, and the University of Kentucky. So you have those as your paid customers, and then you also have customers who don't pay, perhaps individuals. I wonder, are companies as quick to vote with their feet, pull the plug on a relationship with a business the way individual consumers are through, say, boycotting certain products or services? What's your observation there?
That's a good question. It's just much harder, certainly, to either adopt because of a value or to leave because of a value. But also, I would say it really comes back to, for the vast majority of people, it just was a non-event. There might have been individuals in a company who were bothered by it, but for any particular company, there are probably also individuals that really resonate with it. And so it kind of just cancels it out. So maybe on a company-wide basis, it's basically is just largely a neutral effect, even if it strongly resonates positive or negative with individuals.
Understood, understood. We talked about customers, we talked about employees. Other stakeholders, of course, are your board of directors. Is the act of taking a public position on something like politics or any social issue for that matter something you discussed with your board of directors ahead of time?
No, we decided, what we did was basically, we have a newsletter that goes out to all of our users. And our newsletter has long been loosely related to the product. It's talked about, we launched our nonprofit there, we talked about BLM there, things like this. And so the newsletter has always been pretty wide-ranging commentary coming from me to customers. And so we discussed internally, we decided this is really a message from the company. It's no reflection upon investors. This has not been consulted with our partners. There's no endorsement from anyone else to this message. It's just exclusively about us. And so we decided we're just going to make this statement for ourselves and then really kind of distance ourselves from everyone else.
I see. Well, having said that, you certainly do have investors, and like most startups, you have a lot of venture capital funds that back your firm. What kind of reaction did you get from them? Did they respond to you or reach out to you in any way?
Well, yeah, of course. And some are mixed. Some are like, oh my God, what did you do? Others are like, this was amazing. I can't believe you did this. And we're like, all right, well, again, it's kind of this neutral thing that just works itself out. Now, luckily, we're profitable, so we're not out raising money. We're not, a lot of startups are just always angling for what does the next VC think about this, or what might they think about it? And it makes people perhaps more risk averse than we are. We care much more about what does the company need, what do our employees want, and what does the world need us to do in this moment. And so I think the focus was really on how do we just do our part as citizens to defend democracy and then let the chips settle how they will.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. The fact that you're profitable, the fact that you're not angling and seeking money, seeking fundraising is a big consideration there. One thing about Expensify is that it's based in Portland, Oregon. And of course, that's been a hotbed of protests since the spring and the summer and even this fall. How do you think that influenced your decision making on this?
Well, it certainly did. Now, I would say we're not really based anywhere. No, we have offices in San Francisco, Portland, Michigan, New York, London, Melbourne. So we've got people all over the world, and none of them have.
But you're in Portland right now, yes?
I'm personally in Portland. Yeah, that's right. And so I'd say certainly the experience engaging on the ground with protest organizers in the BLM movement has really matured this organization, because it's easy to have a knee-jerk reaction to basically any social movement, like, oh, it's obviously good, or it's obviously bad, or whatever it is. Once you start getting involved for real, nothing is obvious. Everyone is complicated. And I think that sort of complexity has led us up to this, realizing it's like there is no simple way to view this matter. There is no one perspective that everyone's going to agree on. It's like even the idea of is Trump suppressing votes? Are voter ID laws? Are those to defend the vote, or are those to actually suppress the vote? And that's a complicated discussion. And I think the way we approach it is the goal here was to start discussions on a large scale. And we spun up a whole group of volunteers inside of our company. We said, hey, anyone who wants to talk to customers about this, we're going to create a special part of our support tool and escalate conversations of this. So we had a huge range of our employees. We're just having long philosophical and political discussions with thousands of individuals about this particular topic. And those thousands of conversations changed us. We really understood this topic and much more than we ever did. And I think really walked away from it just having a much more nuanced appreciation for all of the sides of this perspective. It's a complicated issue. But just because it's complicated also doesn't mean it's not happening. I think the challenge is to say it is happening. Vote rigging is happening right in front of us, and we have to do something about it.
So clearly what this current government does frustrates you and you want to address it. But overall, I wonder, is your take that the government in general should do more to fix big problems? And by this, I'm talking about societal problems, inequality. Or is it reasonable to leave a lot of that to the private sector to sort out, to address the gaps, and rely on, for better or for worse, for CEOs to kind of come up with fixes?
CEOs can't fix gerrymandering. Like CEOs can't fix national popular vote. I would say the foundation of the government is to do specifically this, is to create that level playing field. And so, yes, we exist and operate on that level, that playing field. But I think fundamentally we need every administration to, more important than any issue, is to defend democracy itself. And I think that's what's so alarming, and what kind of forced us to act is that we have sort of wings of the government infecting and attacking itself. Like we've never seen someone politicize the post office before and intensely sabotage mail delivery to promote an election, or to go against the census statisticians and say, no, I know what's more important for the census. It is to not include people intentionally in order to distort the distribution of assets for the next, 10 years. We're talking about like $20 trillion over the next 10 years are going to be spent based upon this information. So I'd say, no, the government has an obligation more than any other issue to defend democracy itself. And that's what was under attack.
Okay, so let's talk about democracy for a moment here, because you've called democracy, or you've said democracy is an essential part of your corporate culture. You're a flat organization, and I've read that nobody reports to any other person. Pay is determined by a team vote. Is this a regular thing then to wade into any kind of issue that threatens your notion of democracy?
Well, I mean, it's not my notion of democracy. And it's a pretty well-defined concept of voting and access to voting and things like this. And so this is not like a radical idea. This is one of these things that basically every American agrees to. And so I would say we don't have a desire to wade in to topics unnecessarily. I would say this one was just coming down to, it feels like, if anyone here has been watching, The Handmaid's Tale, it's shocking the parallels of what's happening. And it's not, and I think the show really talks about, like, we all just watched it happen right in front of us. And I think it's easy to roll our eyes at Trump and be like, that's just Trump being Trump when he says he's going to go for a third term or something like this. But my concern is, it is Trump being Trump. And if we've learned one thing, he's not a liar. He believes what he says, or he doesn't think he's a liar. He's going forward as actively and purposely as possible to do what he claims he's going to do. And I think he believes it. And so I think we need to take him at his word that these promises are actually threats. And we need to not look back at this time and wonder, what could I have done? We want to say, what did I do? And I want to look back at this time and know that I did everything that was in my power to try to fight this destruction that's happening. And I would like more CEOs and more people to get involved. And I know it's inconvenient. It's frustrating. It's boring. No one wants to get involved in these wonky issues. This is just not fun. No one signed up for this part of the job. But as citizens, it is our job. We can't forsake that job. Or rather, we can, but that's just to endorse the status quo. And so if we care about this democracy, and if we care about making it a vibrant and diverse place that respects our rights, like, we need to defend that. And that never comes at a convenient time.
The costs are too high, otherwise is basically your message there. Do you think this is a start of more political activism on Expensify's part? Do you plan to weigh in on, say, more local ballot issues, down ballot races? I mean, do you see more engagement along these lines down the road?
Oh, absolutely. But we've, like in Portland, for example, there's this act called the Real Police Accountability Act. And so we've really been talking to the authors of it and really trying to promote tangible, constructive change. I think that's one challenge of the BLM movement is for every one instance of violence, there's, 50 different peaceful protests and people trying to make constructive change on the ground. And so, no, we were not just about symbolic virtue signaling. We're trying to engage in the trenches on the complex issues that make society a better place inch by inch. And it's not easy and it's not fun, but we feel it's a part of the duty of being a citizen is to actually take the time to get involved. And so, yeah, we intend to get more and more involved over time.
David, final question to you. Any regrets about the way this email was handled or unfolded or the outcome of it? If you had the opportunity to redo any of it, would you?
I would make a couple of changes. One, I wouldn't have written the first person. I wrote it as if it was me talking, but it was very much a team effort that wrote the entire thing. So I think that was a mistake. Second, I would have done more to clarify that this was not an endorsement by any partners or anything else. It's like to choose the product doesn't mean that you have to endorse this particular candidate. And so I think that those two changes I would make. But in general, I look back at this with a tremendous amount of pride. I think the company has stood up for a complex issue in a difficult time against a lot of criticism. But I think all of us look back at it with pride and say, this was the time to stand up. And especially, we don't know where this election is going to end. But no matter where it ends, I think there's going to have to be a real reckoning and a real conversation in this country about how serious are we about democracy, and do we believe that democracy takes precedence over any individual policy issue? I think it does, and I think by definition it needs to, but I feel like we may have lost sight about that, or at least some of us have.